All right, all right, all right. Welcome to another episode of the Aries Show. Austin, I can't believe we're a couple episodes in, man. How fun is this crap, man? I'm having the time of my freaking life.
Man, how fun was that Twitter Spaces the other night we did?
It was
That was
awesome. Yeah,
that
the
was
the Aries
interesting.
podcasting, wrestling podcasting community came in strong for you.
Yeah. Jeff does a Twitter Space. He said Monday nights for podcasters because you basically you do podcasts about podcasting, so you hold these little Twitter Spaces. I've never done a Twitter Space, so I thought let me pop in here and see what it's about. See if I get a little bit of traction in there. Some people popping in, and it turned into chaos. Yeah.
A little bit.
A little
They've
bit.
actually got one time Eric Bischoff was brought up in one of them. He had been at Podcast Movement, and
Okay.
there was this special needs podcaster that joins the space sometimes. And he just went off and did about 1,000 impressions of Eric Bischoff saying, or like Vince McMahon saying, "You're fired" to
Yeah.
Eric Bischoff.
Nice.
That was one of my funnest. That was like a good off the rails.
You're
but this
fired.
One, yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy could do it perfect. So, but no, this was a little bit different off the tracks. And I never got a DM from that guy.
No, I actually saw him tweet afterwards that he had a conversation with me and he loved it. But so basically what happened is that we ended up having a debate over the term of podcast and how loose it's kind of become. And so I think what we've kind of settled on is the old school mentality. Podcasting means it had to be under a certain, what's it called? An SRM?
Like an RSS feed. Yeah.
RSS. I had some of the letters right. That shows you I'm not very adept at this, but an RSS feed, right, is a typical podcast, right? And so this guy just runs a YouTube channel. And that's it. And he has no RSS feed. It's just a YouTube channel. So the question basically was being asked was, well, why don't you just call it a YouTube show? And why do you call it a podcast?
In the title. Yeah.
Right. And so he was getting really offended by it and upset. And he kept touting his listenership and how much money he's making. And we're like, hey man, we're not cutting on you and your success. We're proud of you. We're asking the question of how do you define podcast? Anyway, it was a fascinating discussion for an hour. I did learn a lot about, the podcast world. And then I think some of your podcasting friends got a little taste of the pro wrestling world and fandom. So it was definitely interesting.
My big thing, just for the record, then we'll move on. My big thing was, I don't really give a shit about what you consider a podcast or not.
Sure.
You should have it as many places as possible for people to consume.
Right. Well, and
that was my whole thing all along.
Yeah.
It wasn't about whether is it a podcast or not a podcast.
Sure.
I'm like, dude, it would take you 5 minutes to make it a podcast.
Well, and the truth came out.
He never did. He never will do.
Yeah, the truth came out 30 minutes later, and now it made more sense why he was kind of getting a little defensive. Is he didn't know how to upload it anywhere else other than YouTube. So he just said, well, I'm just focusing on YouTube. And what he meant to say is, I only know how to do YouTube. And I was like, well, hey man, these guys will help you out. It's not hard to throw it up in these other platforms where people listen to podcasts. It's only going to help you, not hurt you. But that was pretty fascinating. And I actually kind of think I want to start doing some of these Twitter spaces myself, just for some different topics of conversation. I think it'd be kind of cool as a way for me to kind of re-engage my Twitter following, because my engagement really isn't great right now because I haven't really used Twitter much since I got my head chewed off for, sharing my opinions on masks and COVID-19 and things of the sort. So it might be a good way to have some good debate on there and drum up some interest.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should do it. I'll help.
Sounds good.
If not, it'll just run rampant and they'll just be saying whatever and you won't know what to do.
Yeah, we'll just be talking to each other on there. That's fine.
No, I meant I know how to accept people to speak and all that's what I was saying.
You run traffic like you do here. You'll run the traffic for me.
I'm the traffic guy.
Traffic control man. Traffic control Jeff.
Yeah. So man, what have you been up to in the turnip eating world the last week?
Oh man, I spoke at Veg Fest in Fort Myers, and I haven't done any of these speaking engagements for probably almost 3 years now, since, pre-COVID. And so I used to do these pretty frequently, go talk at these different veg festivals, or I've spoke for at Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine, PCRM, which is a plant-based medical facility in Washington, D.C. So I've given speeches there, given talks there. And just kind of, sharing my message, selling some books. And it was nice to get back out there and do that in Fort Myers. It was a nice day, had a pretty good turnout. had some good conversations. I got my ear read. One of the
Oh,
ladies, one of the speakers there, Lisa Wong, she
it's
does
like when they
base
stick their tongue in your ear. Like, what does this consist of? I'm not familiar with ear reading.
not quite. Maybe
Okay,
we've had, yeah, maybe you've had
that's
that
an
done in
Indiana
your
thing,
world.
maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like something you have to do in Indiana just to keep
Uh-huh.
yourself occupied. Um, no, so basically, if you look at the Eastern philosophy of medicine, right, we have all these meridian lines in our body, and there's basically she had like this map of the ear and how all these different parts of the ear translate to other parts and organs in our body. So she has this instrument, kind of looks like a stylus, like a metal stylus, and she'll start testing these parts of your ear by applying pressure, and the places where it hurts are where you have certain blockages or potential issues going on in your systems, right? So she ran like a check on my digestive system because, she asked me like, well, do you have any questions, any intention you want to set? And I said, I feel like I eat really good, right? Like I'm trying to always stay on top of my diet, but I don't feel like I feel as good as I should for how I eat. So she ran through my intestine and she's like, all right, let me know if this hurts, like a scale like 1 to 3. And like for the minute she put that thing in my ear, I was just like, ah. She's like, how bad is it? I'm like, 2.5. Like the whole thing was 2.5 because I was like, well, there might be something worse than this, but this hurts like quite a bit. And so she was like, well, that's your small intestine, that's your large intestine. And I was like, well, fuck, like that maybe I do have some issues there. And so here's the thing that we need to understand is we can have an accumulation in our intestines of shit, right?
Oh,
And this has been shown that people can have 10 to 20 pounds of packed fecal matter. I hope you're not listening to this podcast while you're eating dinner. If you are, I'm just going to give you a warning right now. You might want to save this for after dinner. Um, but so over time, a lot of these foods we eat, right, when it's heavy meat products, so whether it's things like gluten, processed foods, seed oils, like a lot of these things, the fecal matter will start to get impacted in the walls of your intestine, which then makes the area that your food has to travel to digest smaller and smaller and smaller, makes it more difficult. So if you ever feel like, wow, why do I always feel full? Why do I always feel a little bloated? Why do I always feel like even after I use the bathroom, I didn't really feel like I used the bathroom. I still feel like I have some backup in there. And so this is also what can then create disease, right? Because those are toxins your body has wanted to expel that it hasn't been able to, and that can then start to seep back in your bloodstream and create disease. So that's why people recommend doing things like enemas, colon cleanses, colonoscopies, things like that, is to kind of clean out all that backup that you may or may not have in your intestines. So I've never really done anything like that. I've read up about it, I've contemplated it, but I've never actually gone through with it. But it's something that's been on my mind lately. And so, yeah, so she did that reading, and I was like, man, like I guess I need to like do some type of like good cleanse. And so I did a little research online, and I looked at some different protocols, and I got some stuff. It's called oxy powder. So basically, it's like an oxalated magnesium, and so you take these pills, and what it does is it creates like oxygen bubbles in your intestine. And what that does is goes in there and loosens up a lot of the stuff that could be kind of packed in there, and helps you really get rid of it. And so I'm gonna start that tomorrow, and not stray too far from the house and my bathroom while it works its magic. And hopefully, get rid of maybe some things that you know could be in there from years and years and years of just buildup, and think of it no different than your pipes in your house, right? Or I had to clean out my aunt's air conditioning pipe not that long ago, right? It was starting to drip back into the garage just because the pipe was clogged. So we're
uh-huh.
no different. We got to unclog our pipes and unclog our digestive tract for it to really be optimal. And they've done some autopsies on people where after autopsies they found like 20 to 25 pounds just
Oh,
in their intestine, right? Our intestine's really long, right? It's like a tennis court if you were to unfold it, and right, it take up a tennis court. So that's how much intestine we've got going on in there. So yeah, so if you're out there and you've feel like you've having some issues with your digestion or bloating or constipation, or anything like that, I would suggest maybe going and doing some protocols to do like a good cleanse. And then after I do that, like colon cleanse, then I'm going to go and do a parasite cleanse. Because if you have pets, cats or dogs, if you've been eating meat, chances are you've got some parasites running around in your insides, and those can cause all sorts of other problems, you know. And so you do your colon cleanse, your intestinal cleanse first, then you come through with a parasite cleanse. And so the parasite cleanse I'm going to do uses turpentine, and not the turpentine that you find at the hardware store, but this is a pharmaceutical grade turpentine, like a pure turpentine spirit. So you mix that with a little cubes of sugar. The cubes of sugar draw the parasites out because that's what they want to eat, and then the turpentine effectively kills them. And then you use some castor oil, which then helps you get rid of them. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna do those over the next couple of weeks and see how I feel. You know, maybe I'll have my 6 pack of abs back after I do all that.
I thought we were going to talk about sex and wrestling, but this is an interesting topic. So let me ask you something.
Yeah, go for it.
What's the difference between this and just some boys spiking each other's drinks with some X-Lax like they used to do back in the day? Some laxative,
So right, X-Lax is fine, but that's really affecting, you know, the last couple of meals you ate, right? Your current process. That's not effectively going to loosen up and get rid of things that are, again, you got to think of that stuff like, you know, we're talking about like caked on and it hardens over time, right? And so it's, you know, you need something to help loosen that and get that free. You know, X-Lax is just going to deal with whatever you just ate in the last couple days and how you get rid of it, but not necessarily going to help you get rid of things that have been building up over 10, 15, 20 years of, you know, some bad diet choices. And again, for me, you know, I eat really good now, eat a lot more raw fruits. I've really cut back on all processed foods. But listen, my transition from vegetarian to veganism was solely on these processed fake burgers and fake chicken nuggets and fake, you know, cheeses. You know, I really relied heavily on those in the transition. And even up until a few years ago, was eating those things a lot more than I really should have been. And so, you know, while I'm eating really well now, that doesn't necessarily account for whatever buildup I accumulated over the last 5 or 10 years. And I've never really addressed it. So hopefully this addresses it. And I feel light as a feather and everything's good to go.
you'll be ready for 60-minute Ironman matches here when you're done
Yeah,
with
man,
this.
I'm down. I'm down. But yeah, so that was cool. Veg Fest was good. Some wrestling fans showed up, which I always like. You know, non-vegan people showing up just to kind of meet me and get a copy of my book. And I plant a few seeds in their brain, and they go, "Yeah, I'm going to think about that a little more." That made a lot of sense what you said out there about milk, or you know, about the spiritual, you know, nature of what we eat and things like that. And so then here's the funny story. So actually, I got invited to go to this place in West Palm Beach afterwards called Hippocrates Wellness Center, and that is like this holistic wellness center that people go to for like 1 to 3 weeks. It's high end, right? So people come from all over the world to get healed of their diseases, and I think it's been around for like almost 40 years now.
So you
And
stay there like rehab kind of sort of thing?
it's
Like,
basically, yeah, it's like a holistic wellness rehab, and so they serve you only the best food. And when I say the best food, I've eaten a lot of places in my life around the world, and they had this buffet there that night, and it was all raw, but it was all vegetables and greens that they grow on the premise, all organic, all like you know, sprouts and greens and vegetables. They did have like some lentil soup that was warm. But it was an amazing spread. Like I've never seen that many different types of sprouts and different types of greens. And again, all grown right there, all grown organically without pesticides. And so, yeah, I loaded up on a big plate of that. And then one of the other speakers at the Veg Fest, Dr. Will Tuttle, he was performing there that night with his wife. He plays the piano, she plays the flute, kind of like some sound therapy a little bit. And so, yeah, I was invited to go there and hang out and see the facilities and listen to his concert and meet some cool people. And so, yeah, so that was fun. And then, so West Palm Beach to where I'm currently at is about 3 hours. So I started driving back about 11 o'clock at night. And so recently I got a different vehicle. I used to have a Lexus hybrid SUV that got flooded in the hurricane that we had here late last year. So that was a total loss. So I had to get a new vehicle for the first time in like 6, 7 years. And so I went with actually a Lexus hybrid coupe, the smaller, just, you know, coupe.
yeah.
And it's great. I'm getting like 45 miles a gallon,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So yeah, so I mean that's nice, especially for some of these road trips I take. But so I'm driving back, And I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to get gas because I don't have enough gas to get all the way back. I'll have to get gas at some point. And I'm like, all right, well, I need, I got another, 25 miles until I get off this exit. And then once I get off the exit, I'll look for a gas station. And, the gas gauge said I'd have about 10 to 12 miles once I got off the exit to find a gas station. No big deal. So, I get off the exit, says I got 10 miles to empty. And I realized that the exit I got off was actually the turnpike.
Oh,
And there wasn't another exit for 10 miles. So now I
so that
realize like
the journey
I
began.
might have just fucked myself here. So then I start looking at my map to see, well, how far is a gas station once I get off this exit? And it's not like another 9 miles until the
Oh,
nearest gas station.
so now you're talking 20 miles.
So I'm talking 20 miles, and it says I got 10 miles to empty. It's midnight at this point. And so so I'm listening to some kirtan music. If you don't know what kirtan music is, it's like chanting, right? Like you're chanting mantras. Krishna Das is one of the most famous kirtan singers. Give it a listen to. It's different, but it's very meditative. Chanting is a way to be meditative, right? Because he chants to the gods, and then you repeat whatever he chanted. And these songs will go 10, 15, 20 minutes of just these chanting back and forth. And when you're chanting, you can't be thinking about other things. You're focused on just this. So it's a form of like active meditation. So I had that plan. So I just was like, you know what? There's no point in me being stressed out, right? There's no point in me being upset. When this runs out of gas, it runs out of gas. I'll hit up my roadside assistance and have them bring me some, and it is what it is, right? Me getting worked up about it isn't going to change anything. So I had the chill music on, and so I decided to switch the car to eco mode. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
well, let me switch to eco mode, and hopefully that helps conserve gas. So when I switched to eco mode, it said I had 6 miles to empty, and the minute I switched to eco mode, it went to 0 miles to empty.
Oh,
No reason. I have no idea why. That is not what should happen. So, and even though it said that, I'm like, well, I probably still have 6 miles. I didn't just lose like 6 miles of gas. So anyway, at this point I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my flashers on, and I'm going to keep my car at about 20 miles an hour, because the way these hybrids work is your lower RPM and your lower miles per hour is done in the electric range. And then as you ramp up your RPMs and go faster, you need gasoline to power that. So I was like, if I keep this in the EV mode, in the electric mode, hopefully I can extend this longer. Because if I'm not stepping on the gas and I'm just kind of going mostly in the electric, maybe I can at least get off the exit and see what I got. So that was my plan. So I put my flashers on, and I just kept this thing steady at like 20, 22 miles an hour. Don't step on the gas at all. Don't rev up the RPMs. And I'm just chugging along. Cars just, zipping by me,
yeah,
just
zipping by it,
in the right lane. I'm just, all right, just doing my chanting.
going to Amish speed.
Yep. And so getting a little closer, 4 miles to the exit, 2 miles to the exit. I hit the exit. Okay, great. And so I kind of coast off the exit. I don't even hit the stop sign. There was no traffic. I'm like, if I stop, then I got to use the gas to start back up. So let me just
Yeah.
roll through this. But now like this exit's kind of like in some like nature reserves. There's no lights. It's foggy. I see like a bunch of deer on the side of the road. There's no cars. There's no gas stations to be seen. It's saying the next gas station is again 9 miles down. So
Oh,
it's like, man, this is, well, I mean, let's just stick with the plan here. So now I'm just plopping along at 20, going up a little bit of hills here. And I get about 5 miles in, and I was like, man, I'm halfway there. And then I see in front of me in the distance, like a stoplight. I'm like, okay, stoplight's a good sign, like that's some life.
yeah.
And then past the stoplight on the left, I see a gas station with its lights on, which didn't show up on my GPS. And so like, man, I think I'm going to make this. And I did. I got through the stoplight. It stayed green. I was able to, just go through that, pull off, and roll into the gas station. And I felt like, you know what? I set a good positive intention. I didn't get worked up about it. I implemented a good strategy, and I traveled 20 miles after my car told me I was on empty, and I was able to fill up my gas and get home. So that was my adventurous travels back from my weekend event at Veg Fest. I was pretty happy, I was pretty happy with the way that turned out.
So you didn't have to call Dixie Carter to come save you.
Oh, I'd still be waiting if that was the case, right?
Yeah, you'd be waiting a long time. Yeah, no, I give you props for keeping calm there. I can only imagine the swear words that I would have been saying.
It,
So yeah,
I tell you what, Jeff, it's one thing I've really, really tried working on. I really have, because I think behind, like, when we're driving, that's one place where most of us can be emotionally, like, off kilter and get, angry and upset, and so it's definitely something I've worked on because, man, at earlier parts in my life, I could get pretty road ragey, you know.
yeah,
And so one thing that's helped me with that is stop being so arrogant, right? Stop being so self-centered that you think everything that happens to you is personal, right? Stop taking it
yeah.
personally. Like this person that's going exactly the speed limit in front of you instead of going 5 miles or 10 miles over isn't trying to make you late. They're not like, we're going to screw Jeff today and make him late for his appointment by going just exactly the speed limit, right? So it's not personal, And so a lot of times if somebody cuts us off, if someone's going slow, like we take it personally, like they're just trying to ruin my day. And so we don't know the situation. We don't know what that person is going through. We don't know, who they are, what they're about. And so when I stopped taking things personally, that helped, right? And then I also always like have this belief. Well, you know what? Maybe if this person was going 10 miles an hour faster, then maybe I get T-boned 3 intersections down. And
Butterfly effect or something.
yeah, and it's one of the Tony Robbins things that I took from when I used to, like, read a lot of Tony Robbins, and actually went to one of his like weekend things. It's like you either like life's happening to you or for you. And it's just a perspective, right? And so, I think for a lot of my life, it's like, oh, it's always happening to me. It's always screwing me. It's like, well, maybe it's happening for you. Like maybe you're supposed to be late. Maybe you weren't supposed to go 10 miles over the speed limit. Maybe you were supposed to make that wrong turn and tack
Boom.
on 15 minutes to your drive, because who knows what would have happened had you not, And so I always try to keep that perspective in the back of my mind every time I'm starting to get riled up or excited about this. Like, hey, man, just calm down. And then here's the other thing. Like, there's really nothing you can do about it, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you're gonna be late, you're gonna be late. If you're gonna
Yep.
miss your flight, you're gonna miss your flight. If you're gonna run out of gas, you're gonna run out of gas. Getting angry and cursing, isn't gonna change any of that. It's just affecting you and your own emotional vibrational energy, and so, again, one of the big drivers of disease and sickness is stress. And a lot of the stress is stress that we give to ourselves, right? It's not
Yeah.
external stress, it's internal stress, right? Because we have this idea of how it's supposed to be. And when it isn't how it's supposed to be, then we get all bent out of shape, So ultimately we have control over that. And yeah, so you know, I was, I saw some growth in that moment, because it's like the minute I turned down that turnpike, I was like, oh man, I think I just screwed myself. But
Yeah.
and I didn't get bent out of shape about it, and it was cool. So that was my little story. So anyway,
Tell you my traffic story yesterday.
give it to me.
So racing to get home to get my kids off the bus, right? And I'm cutting it
Okay.
close. I'm cutting it close, man. I'm not gonna lie. I turn on to this main street in the local town, and this must have just happened minutes before. An old historic building in downtown in this town, all the brick on one side of the wall just collapsed into the roadway. Keep in mind, this is
Wow.
a major state highway that runs through here.
Must have been the
So
the earthquake from Turkey.
I don't know. So all of a sudden, like, there's just shit everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
bricks are everywhere, man. And there's just one car like blocking the road with flashers on. I beat the cops there and everything. So I
Wow.
had to like back out onto another major highway and go around. And I did say some curse words. So,
Right.
uh, yeah. But no, it was like the building just collapsed right before I got there. I'm like, of course. I'm like, well, what did I do to deserve this? Probably.
But what if it would have collapsed as you got there on you?
Uh,
See?
Nobody was hurt in this incident, by the way.
Well, it's good though. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Um, so everything's perspective and how we want to see it. We're either the victim or we're not. And it could be the same exact situation that people see two completely different ways. And it's just perspective, right? And we all have the capability of changing our perspective if the one that we currently hold isn't serving us, So
Sounds like a practice one could use in divorce, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now.
we'll eventually, when the time is right and you feel like you want to vent that out a little bit, we'll talk about it. And actually, one of my guests that's going to be coming up is a good friend of mine, and she's a psychologist, sports psychologist. So maybe that would be a good episode to talk about relationship stuff a little bit. And listen, any type of breakup isn't easy, and especially when you start talking marriage with kids and all these things and difficult stuff that nobody likes having to go through. But let's switch gears a little bit. So what I'm drinking? So I'm drinking some tea here. This is some white blueberry tea. Um,
Oh,
uh, what you don't drink anything during these things? Keep your palate moist.
yeah. I'm drinking vitamin water. Yes, I said vitamin. I like to say
Vitamin
vitamin
water.
instead of vitamin.
What's
Are you
the
proud of me?
read the ingredients list on that? Is it like
Mm,
crystalline fructose, if I'm not mistaken, or something?
reverse osmosis water.
Okay,
Yeah,
water.
yeah, you're right. You got that right. Of course, it's got the ascorbic acid.
Yeah,
Yeah, but Austin, it has vitamins A, C, E, B3,
yeah.
B5,
I,
B6, and
listen, it's
B7.
not the
Damn.
worst. It's not the worst thing. A lot of vitamins that are fortified in there aren't going to be really utilized as well as if you just
You saw what
actually.
I was drinking earlier today, so you should be proud.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's a big improvement over soda and your Diet Coke. And it's funny because you said, "Hey, what are we going to talk about tonight?" And I said, "Soda." You're like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, we're going to talk about soda because we're going to get you off that poison. We're going to get you off that garbage. Maybe it'll bring some color back to your complexion, right? You know,
Maybe. But the
could
funny
be
thing is, I was literally drinking a pop, as we'd call it here. I was literally
right. Yeah,
drinking a Diet Coke when you said that. So I took a picture. I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
literally right in front of me.
And that's funny too, because so when I grew up in Wisconsin, but I went to college in Minnesota, and when I got there, everyone in Minnesota calls soda pop. So
Uh-huh.
that was like the big debate my freshman year: is it pop or is it soda? And I was like, "Well, where are you guys from?" They said Minnesota. I said, "Exactly. You're not from Minnetonka, right?" So anyway, terrible joke, right? But that was like the big debate. So you say pop, I say soda. We'll just call it soda pop. So we hit both of them. So um, to me, like soda pop is one of like the most anti-nutritional things we could consume, right? It really is. And
Okay.
so and people think that drinking diet soda somehow is going to be better for them, and it's not necessarily, right? Obviously, when you're drinking regular soda, the name brands, you're consuming something called high fructose corn syrup, and mostly now they're starting to switch over to cane sugar, which is a little better, but still, refined sugars are something we should be really limiting in our diet. But high fructose corn syrup, that's like jet fuel of sugar, right? It's highly destructive. But so the diet sodas have artificial sweeteners, and usually they use something like aspartame, right? So the thing about artificial sweeteners is the body doesn't necessarily register it differently, right? It still releases insulin, right? These artificial sweeteners. And so your insulin is like your body's primary fat storage hormone. So if you're releasing insulin on these diet sodas, what you're doing is you're storing fat, right? So it's probably something we don't want to do. And then aspartame has also been linked to, and again, we can scrutinize the studies, but it has had some links to cancer and some other issues with that. There's also something in there called phosphoric acid, right? If you read the ingredients label of your soda, phosphoric acid. You know what else phosphoric acid's used for?
No.
The removal of rust on metals.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Interesting, right? And then they put that in soda and you drink it. And why they put it in soda, it gives it that like sharp, tangy flavor, and it also helps it from getting any bacteria or fungus growing in there, right?
Ah.
But it also leaches calcium from your bones, right? So it makes your bone density less, and makes your bones more brittle over time. So that's probably something we don't really want. And then just being acidic overall is really bad for your gut bacteria. And as we've talked about, um, what happens in your gut directly is related to what happens in your brain, because your gut affects your hormones in your brain, right? So depression, anxiety, stress, all these things, we think some mental health. It's really our gut health is where it starts. So we're drinking the super acidic sodas, which then destroys the bacteria of our gut, doesn't help our mental health. It's been, linked to heart disease, diabetes, strokes. And I guess you'd, agree with me that those are all bad things,
Yeah.
things you probably don't want to deal with. So we got to get you off the soda. But then it's always, okay, well, what's the solution? Is there something, what do you transition to? There are some sodas on the market that are a step up from your commercial sodas. One's called Zevia, Zevia, and so it uses stevia as a sweetener, which isn't as bad as even these fake sugars, or cane sugar, or high fructose corn syrup. Another one's called BAI5, and they also, I think, use stevia, and they use like a natural, like, fruit for coloring and stuff like that. The coloring a lot of times the dark sodas is caramel color, which is just basically like charred um, sugars from different, like, corn or grain or whatever. Um, so there's options, or you can always just go with like sparkling water and try to add some flavor to it, like natural flavor, like adding, like, I don't really do sparkling water because me and carbonation don't really mesh too well, but I'll put like frozen berries or frozen mango in my sparkling water, or not my sparkling water, just in my water, but you can put it in your sparkling water to give it some flavor. And then you have to ask yourself how much of it is the caffeine is what you're really, really
Oh,
craving and addicted to, and so if that's the case, then, you'd have to look for an alternate caffeine source, or try to kick the caffeine altogether if you think you could. So I don't know. What do you think?
is is the I don't remember what you said. Is the Five Guys one? What was it? No, the Buy Five one.
Yeah,
Five
BAI
Guys, great
5.
place.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, real good.
Is that in common grocery stores like at your Meijer, your Kroger? I don't know what you
I,
guys have down there.
I would probably say no. You might have to go to a more of a specialty store, or I imagine these day and age, if you live anywhere that has internet, you can look and order things to be delivered, whether it's through Amazon or another similar company like that. Yeah, you might have to look at more of a specialty store. Um, I know that that Zevia one's a little more common, and you might be able to find that in a regular supermarket. Otherwise, I don't know how far a Whole Foods is, or a Sprouts or something like that from you.
Yeah,
But I would just look up online and see, it'll tell you where it's being distributed. But it's like, okay, like, it's not going to be that much more expensive. And again, you were talking about your health, right? So if soda is
yeah.
going to be a crutch of yours and you're going to try to transition away from it, it's like, don't buy the lowest grade, cheapest, easiest shit. Like, spend a little more money, and try to at least get the highest quality stuff you can.
I
But
was
yeah,
feeling good
man.
about myself too. I weighed in at 204 today,
Yeah.
cruiserweight.
Yeah.
I'm
Nice.
now a cruiserweight, but now you're making me feel bad again, just
I'll
like
tell you
last
what, man, like,
recording.
when I was growing up, like, one of my best friends, all through like middle and high school, his breakfast was Diet Coke and Marlboro Reds. I mean, that
Oh,
was that was
oh,
breakfast. And like, and I hung out with him so much that I adopted some of those habits. I started smoking cigarettes when I was 15, and I smoked almost a pack a day for 5 years. I quit when I was 20, and but yeah, so, and both my parents smoked when I was growing up. It was kind of like a Midwest thing, smoking cigarettes and bowling. It's kind of it's a Wisconsin thing. But yeah, so I
Wisconsin.
developed, I had some bad habits, in my younger years that luckily for me, I was able to overcome, and adopt some better ones. And I drank a lot of soda as a kid, a lot of, generic Mountain Dew and things like that. But now I maybe have a soda once every couple years, and I have a hard time finishing a whole can. I'll have a couple of sips, and it's too sweet, and it's not really, it doesn't really taste too good. So it can be done. It's just, it all comes down to if you want to. And if you don't want to, that's cool. It's your life, but I figure that, we're going to be sitting here every week talking, and it's not my personality type to not try to offer you some suggestions to try to help, you know, uh, level up a little bit.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, man.
that's a T-shirt I'm working on. Continue to level up. What's the
That's
other one?
it.
Turn up, eating, teeny. Yeah,
Teeny,
I'm gonna get
teeny tiny turnip eating man.
that's gonna be on a T-shirt. But no, I
Uh-huh.
wanted to. You're talking about the Mountain Dew off-brand. Isn't that
Yeah.
called Fago Moon Mist?
It might be, man. I don't know.
And it
I
was
mean, I
always
don't,
pushed by the Juggalos.
was it? Okay. Yeah, I
Your
mean,
favorite
growing
kind of
up,
wrestling too. That's where you're
my favorite,
trained, right?
yeah, right. Yeah. Uh, yeah, growing up, man, like that was, we had all the generic everything, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
like, instead of like Fruit Loops, it was like Fruit Rings, like, instead of Rice Krispies, it was like crispied rice. You know, it's like they didn't really
Yeah.
even put like a lot of effort into renaming them or whatever. And I was like always so upset. I was like, man, like why can't we just get the real cereal like the other kids? You know,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it's
Damn it.
twice as much. You know, it's like, but yeah. So we had all the generic cereals and sodas, and man, I think back, it's like, man, no wonder, like, oh, you know, your son that can't pay attention in class, he's hyperactive. It's like, well, you're giving me like 80 grams of sugar at lunch, you know, like chocolate milk and ice cream sandwiches, and then you're like, okay, go run around for 10 minutes, and it's like, okay, I'll sit still for the next 4 hours. You know,
Yeah.
it makes no sense, right?
Nah, I guess it doesn't when you bring that up.
Nah, it doesn't at all. But yeah, man, I haven't really drank soda for a long time. Um, one of our habits back when I first broke in wrestling back in Minnesota, we'd always go to Subway after camp, and we get different sandwiches. And yeah, at the time I was still vegetarian. I hadn't quite transitioned to veganism yet, so more options when you eat the cheese and the mayonnaise and things like that. But one of the wrestlers there who was probably pushing 315, 320, he would get the foot long, and he would get double meat, double cheese, double mayo, no vegetables, please. It's just
Oh man, no
and
vegetables
just
at all, huh? Wow.
yeah, man, no vegetables. It was like to him, like that was the toxic poison, right? But it was only, I just remember it was like it wasn't just the no vegetables. It was like double mayo, double
Yeah.
cheese, double meat. I'm like, you're doubling down on all of it, man. So
You should have at
um,
least done double light meal.
yeah, right. Okay, because that makes much difference.
Yeah,
That's to
that's
the people
better.
that like they go order like the double cheeseburger and the fries. They're like, oh, and a Diet Coke, please, because that's going to be the thing that's going to shift that meal from grotesque and to oh, it's not so bad though. I got the diet soda instead, right? Like, nah, it doesn't work that way.
I just
Um,
like the taste of diet soda. I do.
oh, it's fucking gross, man.
I think some people that it really is the case, man. Like diet Dr. Pepper. Like some people like the taste more than the regular.
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm
guess
serious.
I think a lot of these tastes are acquired tastes, and if you get off it for a while and you go back and drink it, you're gonna go, man, how
Yeah.
the fuck did I ever drink this stuff? I really think that's the case. I mean, it's like coffee. You a coffee drinker?
No.
No. Do you like coffee?
No.
Yeah, right. And either did I. The first few times I drank coffee, it tasted terrible, and I acquired the taste for it now. But when I've gone long stretches and not drank coffee and kind of got out of my system, and then go back and have that first couple sips, I'm like, yeah, Jesus Christ. Same with beer. Beer the same way. So our taste buds and our likes will adapt if as we change our habits and what we drink. So I don't know. We'll keep working on it. We'll get you off the soda eventually. Work in progress.
Vitamin
Yeah,
water.
man. Yeah, man. So speaking of Minnesota and old training days, sad news recently where Thunderblood Charlie Norris passed away. Um,
Yeah.
I saw two different reports. One said 57, one said 59. Um,
Neither
but
one's that old.
yeah, neither one's that old. And so Charlie, for those who don't know, Charlie Norris was he was probably most well known as, I guess you call it enhancement talent for WCW back in the day. Um, but that upper echelon enhancement talent,
Yeah.
big guy, like a big guy, super nice. And when I broke in, 2000, Charlie was one of those vets that had TV experience, that we could
Yeah.
kind of look to and be like, all right, cool. Like there's a path for us to someday get to TV because we're in these locker rooms with guys who have been there, and other guys like, Sean Waltman, X-Pac, and Jerry Lynn had also kind of come out of that area. So we had some role models, so to speak, to look to so that we felt like, okay, like that could be us someday. Like guys from here have gone there. And Charlie was one of those guys and was just always really cool. And so one of my funny stories, I remember my first time in my first trip up to Canada. We're doing a big road trip with the crew, and we're going up to like Winnipeg area to go do some shows. And we're in like these two vans, and Charlie got wind of the fact that I had some tasty green flowers in my possession, and from the minute he found that out, he switched vans, and we were in. I was his brother now, brother, hey, hey, brother. just sit next to me, chatting me up. Every time we stopped, hey brother, let's go. We got to get rid of that before we get to the border. Let's go get rid of that before we get to the border. And
Plowing through it.
plowing through it because you don't want to try to take it through, through the border and through customs or whatever. So he made sure to help me get rid of everything before we got there. But yeah, I just remember that. I remember that story when I read about his passing, that he befriended me and I became his brother pretty quick on that
Yeah.
trip. And for me, it was great because again, I'm super brand new and green, and now I'm getting to
Yeah.
chat it up with him and pick his brain a little bit and feel like accepted, from a guy that had some success. So,
Local guy.
rest.
That's always feel good too. Like you said, like
Yeah, and he was a guy that too, even though he had his cup of coffee and got to do TV wrestling. Like when he came back and was doing shows with us, there was never any big league in or any ego or whatever. He was just kind of one of the boys, and so yeah, so sad to see that. We lost Sodbuster Kenny J a little bit before that too, and that's a guy that also old school wrestler that had been doing this for a long time. Old AWA enhancement guy, and actually faced Muhammad Ali in an exhibition
oh,
match. Yeah, wrestler versus boxer. And
that's a good story. Yeah.
yeah, so sad day for Minnesota wrestling in the past couple weeks here. So rest in peace to those two gentlemen. And yeah, it's it's part of life. It's never any fun to deal with. But one thing I've come to learn in my in my experiences now through some of my plant medicine ceremonies is death is nothing to fear. It's a beautiful transition to the next realm, to the evolution of our soul. So it's definitely given me a different perspective to not fear it and not to look at it as completely as a sad thing. So it's sad for us here in this realm, in the 3D experience on Earth, but depending on what you believe, it's just a part of the transition to our next journey. So
Very
all
soon, the
good.
next journey's 2D. For all
Well,
we know.
ideally, you want to be moving the other direction, and you want to be going to the fourth and fifth
Yeah.
dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
know. But for you keep drinking soda, yeah, probably going to be 2D. So
Vitamin water. Vitamin water. Vitamin water.
that stuff's okay. But you know what? You can get the same. So you can take water, like you can take a good, like, filtered spring water, and you can add your own electrolytes and you can add your own natural sweeteners. Again, just add in a few pieces of fruit, some lemon juice, man. Squeeze some organic lemon juice and a little bit of sea salt in there. And that basically, is Gatorade, right? That is vitamin water, right? And so, um, if you're having to rely on things like vitamin water to get your vitamins, you need to take another look at your dietary choices because that's not where you should be trying to get your vitamins, in my opinion, right? We
Yeah.
should trying to be getting through supplements or water. This is where it comes back to eating nutritious food, not calorically dense food that doesn't have any nutrition in it, right? And then when we cook food, we start killing the nutrients, start killing the enzymes. So we're eating all this stuff and we're eating all these calories, but we're not actually getting what our body wants, which is vitamins and nutrients. And then we're still hungry. Why am I still hungry? Because your body's still starving for the thing it wanted. It didn't want calories. It wanted nutrients, right? And so, but anyway, I won't. That's piling enough on you here in one episode. We'll switch it up a little bit.
So what if I added some iron and lead in the water? Then it would just be Flint, Michigan.
Basically,
This
yeah,
poor
some
people there.
fluoride.
Yeah.
Put some fluoride in the water too. You know, don't even get me started on fluoride. We don't have enough time for me to get started on fluoride. We'll do that some other week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, no. Nevertheless, it's a good lesson and something to a good practice, I guess one could say.
yeah, I think so. So I had an idea. For like a little segment, right? So I don't know if you remember back in the Ring of Honor HD Net days, if you watched any of that stuff.
Going way back. Yeah.
Um, so I did this. This is my second reign as the world champion there, and I had this idea I came up with. It was called the Austin Aries Lucky Lottery, and the premise
Okay.
was every week on TV, I would put 50 of the top wrestlers around the world into a hat, and I would draw a name out for a shot at the Ring of Honor world title. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, being a bad guy at the time, the whole idea was, they weren't really the 50 top 50 top wrestlers in the world like they were just a bunch of ham and eggers, right? So
Yeah.
I'd pull out some, lower level guys and then just beat them up, right? So that was the whole thing. Or like I remember one week I pulled out Kenny Omega's name, knowing that Kenny Omega was in Japan and he couldn't possibly challenge me for the title, right? So, and then
Awesome. Yeah. Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I was like, oh, he's going to try to make a big name for himself in Japan. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Well,
I'd say
well,
he did
damn.
extremely well, right? He
Yeah. I'd
did
say he
very
did
well
pretty
for
well. Yep.
himself. Yeah,
It's
good
like
for him.
10-star matches. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, 10-star matches. So and I've had some 10-star matches. If you add like 3 of my matches up, you get to 10 stars.
Yep.
Just like I can bench 450 pounds, right? Over like 10 reps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. If you add them all. Yeah.
add them
Exactly.
all up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I had this premise of the lucky lottery, and actually ended in this really cool segment where I did a fireball to Tyler Black, now known as Seth Rollins. He came down to the ring to basically call me out on the scam, and I told him he could pick the name out this week. If he thinks it's a scam, you pick the name out. And when he picked the name out, it was a blank. He's like, it was a blank piece of paper, but it was actually lighter, like flash paper. And I lit it, and it did a fireball. So I was always a big mark for fireballs back in the day.
Yeah.
We used to have those. So, but anyway, so going off that idea, I thought about doing a segment called "Big Bird Wants to Know." Okay,
Okay.
and
Okay. Yeah.
you're probably asking yourself, what the fuck does Big Bird have to do with this? Well, this is one of my oldest hats in my collection I've had since college.
Oh, great
Got it,
visual here.
got it at a thrift store in college. Used to wear it on stage when I sang in a heavy metal cover band. And for me, and this is my sense of humor for those of you who want to get to know me a little better, there was something hilarious about me like singing like Godsmack or Metallica,
Yeah.
like headbanging with Big Bird on my head, just doing this, right? Like there's just because it was like
Yeah.
two
Yeah. Big
exact
Bird. Yeah. It's the
opposites,
visual
right?
right now. If you can't see, Big Bird's got a little head flapping off the top of this
Yeah.
toboggan here, and so
Yeah.
when you're rocking your head, he's also
Right,
rocking
and
with you.
it's
I
Big
got
Bird's
you.
just
Yeah.
jamming out to heavy metal. So to me, that was funny. So I'd wear it during my shows sometimes. But I've just kept the hat all the years because like where are you gonna find one of these?
Crazy you
I
didn't lose
I
it.
I dare you to try to Amazon this or find this somewhere. This is a collector's item at this point, right? So the segment is going to be called Big Bird Wants to Know. And basically we're going to take questions from the listeners that have submitted questions through email at austinariesshow@gmail.com. If they've submitted questions via DM on Twitter, Austin Aries Show, or Instagram, Austin Aries Show. And so people can submit questions, and I'll take the questions and we'll put them in the Big Bird hat, and I'll draw 1 or 2 out every week, and we'll answer questions from the listeners. What do you think of that idea?
That's a good idea. I like it. But what
Yeah,
if the
man.
question's something like ridiculous? Like I don't even
Well,
want to throw anything out.
no, that's good, right? Because that's good. Something I thought about. People will say, "Well, yeah, but you ultimately, if you're writing the question down and put it in the hat, you get to kind of censor the questions a little bit, right?"
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing about me, right? I don't really. I'm pretty transparent. There's no skeletons in my closet I'm worried about. I'm pretty much an open book. I'm hoping that quality is one thing that's going to draw people to this podcast over time.
Yeah.
I kind of think of myself as just a normal guy in a lot of ways, no different than the listeners, no different than the fans. And I don't really have anything to hide. I think that all my qualities, my good and bad qualities, all the mistakes I've made in my life, can just be tools to help other people or help them connect and realize that they're not alone. So there's really, to me, like really no questions that are like, you know, out of bounds. Nothing that, oh, we can't talk about that. Right. And so,
Okay. Yeah.
um, and that's why I kind of waited a while to ever do one of these shows, because I didn't want to do it at a time where I felt like I had to be very careful about my reputation or my perception of these things. And I'm at that place in my life. I don't care. Like I am who I am, and I'm comfortable with who I am. And I have a lot of great people in my life that love me for who I am, and I love them for who they are. And we'll go with that. So yeah, so there's really no questions, unless you're just trying to be, unless you're just trying to be an asshole, and there's, no substance or no value to the question. I don't really have anything to hide from. So submit the questions, and I'll jot them down, every week, jot some down, and we'll start accumulating in the Big Bird hat. And then every week we'll do Big Bird Wants to Know.
So are we going to kick this off today?
I
Do
I
we
said
had
we kick it off
okay, yeah,
today.
yeah. All
We've
right.
had a few questions come in after the last couple episodes, so we
Yeah.
told people where they could. So, been a few questions. So we got a handful of ones in here, and we're gonna take some out here. All right. So this question is from Yaya F from Instagram, and her question
Okay.
is, what's the favorite place you've ever been to for wrestling? Um, okay, that's a good question. And I've been, I've always said like one of the absolute best things that pro wrestling has done for me is allowed me to travel the world, right?
Yeah.
Because like where I grew up and my family and my circle around me, traveling really wasn't a big part of the equation, and
Just
so
cows and cheese. Yeah.
yeah, right, cows and cheese, and um, so going to the bowling alley, that was
Yep.
the big excursion.
Skating ring. Skating ring was big in my life.
Roller skating.
Yep.
Yeah, we had skate land. I'm a terrible roller skater and ice skater. For being a decent athlete, that's not where my athletic ability ever translated. Um, yeah, so I've been blessed to travel, you know, all over the world to places I never thought I'd be. Man, and so another thing about I very rarely have favorites. Like I have places I like and places I don't like. It's like, what's your favorite band? I'm like, I don't have a favorite. I don't have a favorite much of anything. Um, so I hope Yaya's not disappointed that I don't like zero in on one place, but I'll give some places that were my favorites. Um, so one of my first favorite places I got to go was Australia before they got all super fucking crazy during COVID or whatever, locked everything down. And oh man, I got some friends that were like in special forces and stuff in Australia, and like
Yeah.
they fled out of there. We I met them down in Mexico. It was like people were fleeing from all their respective countries and getting out while they could, not having to deal with some of that nonsense. But yeah, but my first time in Australia was awesome. Like I love the ocean, and so obviously it's a big island, so there's lots of beaches, and surprisingly, like Australia's is like got three of like the top five vegan cities like in the world as far as just options and to eat and things like that. So I had a great time visiting a lot of places. I went there for World Series Wrestling,
Okay.
which was a great, and I think they're back up running now again. They obviously took a hiatus. Yeah, man, just a great tour, well run. Loved all the local wrestlers that I met there. And just the time of the year that I was going, the weather was beautiful. I got to go dip myself in the ocean and go play in the beach a little bit. So that definitely was one of my favorite spots. Um, I also would say Chile. When I went to Chile, was also, I'm sorry, Peru. Well, I went to Chile and Peru, but Peru, I'm thinking of Peru. So when I went to Peru, that was really cool experience. More so for the fact I stayed after my show and went
Yeah.
to Machu Picchu, and that's obviously like one of the top destinations. Are you familiar with Machu Picchu?
No.
No, okay. So Machu Picchu is like this. It's this like it's this town that was built up on top of these mountains, and it's considered like a very like sacred and kind of spiritual land. But when you get up there,
Okay.
you're just trying to figure out like how the fuck did they build this
Right.
all the way up here? Like how did they get all these stones up here on top of this mountain? Why did they build it up here? Right?
Yeah.
Like how? And so yeah, it's become a big tourist destination now. But I can only imagine before they were commercializing it, like just the level of spirituality and specialness that place had. So I went with one of my good buddies. He came with, and we took a day, and you take basically you're in Ollantaytambo, which is this town, and you got to take a train to the city, and then from there you got to take a bus, or you can hike. You can actually hike over the course of days, and some people do this. They'll hike up the mountain over a
Yeah.
few days and get to the top. We took like a 45 minute. Just think about this: a 45-minute bus ride up the mountain,
Wow.
which tells you how big this is. And then you get up there, and yeah, man, there was alpacas up there and like all these old forts, and you see how everything was aligned with the sun and the stars
That's
as far
cool.
as
Yeah.
the windows and all the different buildings and stuff like that. Just a pretty cool experience. So those are two spots that kind of stick out. And top of my head as far as wrestling, non-wrestling wise, I just got back from Spain not that long ago, and I really, really liked Spain.
Yeah,
Again,
you did.
was able to hang out at the beaches and then enjoy some of the sand and the sun
You
and
tried
the
not to come
culture.
back.
I try not to come back, but I can only be there 3 months at a time on a tourist visa, so I couldn't stay indefinitely. But so I'm back now, and who knows? Maybe I'll return here later on in the year. And I actually found some independent wrestling over there. I was curious. I'm like, yeah, I wonder if there's like indie wrestling here. And it was funny
Sure.
the day that I thought that I was in a place called Kelpe, which isn't a really big city. It's along the coast, and I was walking downtown, and all of a sudden I saw a flyer for an indie wrestling show that had just happened the weekend before, and so I actually snapped a picture of it and DM'd the guy on Instagram, and we hopped on a phone and just had a conversation about what the scene's like there and any opportunities, and so yeah, so maybe next time I go back there, I'll do a seminar or something, and maybe do a show in Spain. So that was pretty cool. So yeah,
That is cool.
what do you think? Should we do one more question, or we got to wrap this up? Where are we at time wise?
About 55 minutes. Yeah, we can do one more question.
All right,
Let's do it.
we'll do one more. All right, this question is from I like this at Bob Orton's Cast on Twitter.
Bob Orton's cast.
Bob Orton's
Okay.
Cast on Twitter.
Okay. All right.
I'll
All
have to
right.
check. I'll have to check that out. All right, so he said Jim Cornette has said many bad things about you. He said you wanted to just be a manager when you were the highest paid guy at Ring of Honor. Why is that?
I remember this. This is years ago now. I remember
Yeah,
this episode of the Jim Cornette experience. I remember this. Yeah.
I was informed of that episode and heard that too. Listen, you know, some things Jim Cornette has said about me are absolutely true. I've owned up to them, right? As far as not being the happiest at that particular time in my life, and at the time we were together in Ring of Honor, I think I touched upon that a couple episodes ago. He said that once I was quoted as saying, "You don't pay me enough to not have an opinion." I 100% said that to him.
I
Uh,
can see that.
yeah, because in context, and this is the important context, while I was the highest paid guy there at the time, I wasn't even making $50,000 a year as a two-time world champion on top of the card. And I was
Yeah.
making less, to my knowledge, than the general manager was making, who had no wrestling experience or respect, really, in my opinion, for the men and women that were busting their ass in the ring, so that he had a job at all. So, so the question of he said I just wanted to be a manager. That's one of the cases where Jim kind of tells a half truth, right? And Jim's good at this. He embellishes some things, and then he tells half truths. So he's not lying completely, but he's not really telling the full picture. So the truth is, at least from my perspective, and there's always three sides to every story, wasn't that I just wanted to be a manager. It was I felt like they weren't really utilizing me, um, you know, as much as they could. I'd already kind of done everything I could do there as far as winning titles, being on top, feuds, this and that. So what I suggested was, hey, in addition to, not only in addition to what I'm already doing as a wrestler, you can put me in the main events, you can do these things with me. Why don't you have me manage some guys and hopefully elevate their game by association? Plus, managing was always something I thought would be a natural transition for me as I got older, because I felt like I had a lot of the tools that translate into being a good manager. I can talk, got a personality. I'm not a really big guy, which as a manager is actually a bonus, because by proxy, it's going to make the guys you're managing look bigger. And
Yeah.
I can take bumps, right? And so there's a payoff to, when a manager can't bump, it's hard to have a payoff a lot of times, right? So at least by being able to take some bumps, I was like, okay, so let me get some experience. And I'm thinking, who better to learn under and start doing some managing and get some feedback from than fucking Jim Cornette, one of the greatest
Yeah.
managers of all time,
Oh,
in
yeah,
my
for sure.
opinion, right? And I just saw
Yeah.
recently they're starting to get some steam about getting the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette in the Hall of Fame. Abso-fucking-lutely, they belong in the Hall of Fame, right? 100%. Um, so anyway, so that's just to clear that up. I wasn't just trying to be a manager. I was trying to be a manager in addition to everything else they wanted to do with me. I was just trying to make myself as valuable as possible. Hey, I can do more. I can wear more hats. let me get some experience doing this. I did the managing thing. I managed Kenny King and Rhett Titus when they formed the team, the All Night Express, which is a name I came up with, right? Playoff of the Midnight Express, the All Night Express.
Yeah.
Instead of having the tennis racket, I had the Sherlock Holmes pipe. That was my gimmick, right? And I,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
blew smoke in some opponents' faces a couple times to create distractions and help my team win.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the story behind it. I wasn't just trying to be a manager. I was trying to do that in addition to whatever else they wanted to do with me. So again, Jim didn't quite tell the whole truth there, nothing but the truth, but that's okay. He's trying to keep his listeners, and he's trying to be a podcaster, which, hey, no, I'm trying to be a podcaster, so I get it.
Did I think there was another question that I had off of that. I recall him saying that you polluted Kenny King's thoughts and basically, or it's possible. Don't quote me. It's possible that you were the individual that polluted Kenny King's thoughts, which led to him basically breaking his contract.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know if I clouded his thoughts. I certainly would never, ever
Because the
suggest
thought was that's what you're doing to the locker room. That's what he was implying.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's two perspectives and ways to look at this. So one, I say it like it is, right? At least from my perspective of what I
Yeah.
see. And, if that paints a bad picture, it's that's because the way it is isn't good. It's not because I'm embellishing or making things up. So first of all, I would never suggest anyone breaks a contract or goes against their agreement. I would never do that. It's not the way I do business. But there might be some truth to it from this aspect, right? Going back to what I said earlier, I was on top of the card there, making under $50,000 a year. Or I should say under 52,000, less than a grand a week. I wasn't even pulling a grand a week.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you have all these young guys who are being asked to take really shitty contracts of $100, $200 a night, sign exclusivity where they couldn't go work for other certain places. And they're all looking to me going, well, yeah, but if I do this, hopefully someday I'll get to be where Austin is. But Austin is going, whoa, hold on a second, guys. You might think that there's some gold at the end of the rainbow, but I'm staring in the pot and there's no pot of gold. There's no gold in this at the end of the rainbow. So just keep that in mind, that when you make decisions to take a terrible contract now, that the payoff isn't anything like you might think it is. So just keep that in mind and make your decision accordingly. And that's what upset these guys, is because I spoke the truth about the reality of the situation at the time. And if that painted a bad picture, I'm sorry, then change the picture. Stop asking guys to take terrible contracts. Stop taking perks away from guys that had perks. Start respecting the guys that had been there. Again, my students that had been there setting up the rings, driving all the towns, tearing it down, setting it up, that weren't getting the pay or the respect they deserved. Here's a story I'll tell you about that real quick. Remember we filmed The Wrestler, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so, actually, you know what? I'm going to save this story for another episode, because I got some guests lined up, and one of the guests I'm going to bring on here is one of the guys I trained, Ernie Osiris. Love the guy, Ernie Caruso. And
Okay.
we're gonna bring him on, and I think that'll be a better time to tell the story, because he was actually there, and then he can give his perspective and make sure I'm not misremembering or saying it differently than it happened. But the thing is, so did I cloud Kenny King's mind? That maybe, I don't know. I mean, I just gave perspective to the situation, but Kenny King's a grown ass man. He makes his own decisions. He's not being led around by me. And I think the assertion that somehow Kenny King, who's a pretty smart cat, is going to be like, led around by me is silly, right? Kenny King's just a smart dude. And when he got a little perspective of the situation, he made a decision that he thought was best for him.
I think this all ties in with the point, though, being the persona that you had as far as being a very talented but miserable son of a bitch.
It wasn't even miserable, man. It was just, I was angry about shit.
Yeah,
I was angry.
That's the word that was used, literally.
Sure. I was angry and upset at some things that were happening that I was privy to the situation, right? Again, I had some things going on in my personal life, relationship stuff, finding out one of my colleagues was having sex with my, ex-girlfriend while she still lived with me. That's a difficult thing to navigate, as you can imagine, then having to come to work And then just some things, with the company, like, and again, don't know it's 100% factually true because it's just things that I heard, but they had an opportunity to have a good deal with HDNet and infuse some capital into the company and give guys proper contracts. And they passed on it because they didn't want to get rid of that GM, who was probably
Sure.
hiding, knew where the bodies were buried, so to speak. And so, that for me was a big red flag because we'd all been, working for not a ton of money, being very physical in the style of wrestling. And I felt like when there was time to pay the boys back, the deal was passed on because it was going to jeopardize maybe some secrets and some skeletons that were hidden in the closet. And that didn't sit well with me. So, um,
Yeah.
but listen, that's old news. We're not going to sit here and rehash it. It is what it is. Everyone's going to have their perspective. I certainly look back at that and listen, if I go back and do some things differently or address things in a better way, yeah, I'd probably do that. I think I've matured a little bit and grown as a person since, 2008 or 9 or wherever that was. And I hope so. I hope we all have. Hope we all
Yeah.
grow and mature as we, are a decade older than we were then. So I'm not gonna harp on it. It's not something I think about too often now, unless people bring it back up, and it's still something that because Jim's talked about it so frequently over the years on his platforms, is something that's still alive, and a lot of the stuff's things I've never really addressed. The other side of the story, and so it might come up from time to time on these episodes, but frankly, man, there's a million other things I'd rather be talking about than Jim Cornette or 2009 Ring of Honor. So, and we're going to do that. And we're going to do that starting next week. I've got some really cool guests lined up. Some from the wrestling world, some from outside the wrestling world. I guess next week, if everything goes according to plan, is one of my good friends that I lived with when I was down in Mexico. I met him down there in Mexico. I moved in. We were roommates for a while. This cat's got a hell of a story. He went from being a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt to ending up in prison, getting stabbed while he was in prison, while he was meditating, nonetheless, getting
Oh,
thrown
wow.
in solitary confinement, and coming out an Ashtanga yoga guru. And now this guy's like one of the most enlightened, beautiful like souls I've met. I learned a lot from him in my time in Mexico. And so, yeah, I'm going to hopefully bring him on next week, and he can kind of tell his story, his journey, and kind of what he's doing now. And I'm pretty excited about that.
That'll be fun. We'll be enlightened.
Absolutely. So cool, man.
One
This is a good
thing,
episode, right?
yeah, one thing I will
Yeah.
not let you escape, though, is the turnip thing.
Or
I'm
what?
going to have that on a T-shirt soon.
I
And I'm
say we
going to
make.
bring that up all the time. So just
I
so
say
you
we
know.
make T-shirts out of it. I feel like one of these weeks okay, here's what we're gonna do. When we unveil the T-shirts, right? I'm actually gonna also eat turnips here on the show for the first time ever because I've never had a turnip before. So
I
we'll
like this.
make some turnips. We'll unveil the teeny tiny turnip eating man T-shirts that we'll put on Pro Wrestling Tees probably or wherever we think's best.
Jeff
And
T-shirts also. Maybe
and
both.
Jeff T-shirts, yeah, we'll do both. And then I'll eat some turnips on here, and it'll be cool.
I like the sound of that. Wow. No, I'm excited. So, no, next week sounds fun. This has been another fun one, man. And it's important to also mention that, like you said earlier, the email is austinariesshow@gmail.com. If you have any
Yep.
questions, comments, as you said before, death threats, anything you want to throw at Austin, he's used to
Get
it.
your
It will,
questions in Big Bird's hat.
yeah, get you some of that big bird. And I will have the website, austinariesshow.com, done one day. I will have it one day with all the things I'm managing. I'm going to get to it. I swear. I will.
Do people still use websites? Is that still a thing? We haven't
Got
just
that damn
completely
hat on.
transitioned over to social media?
No, yeah, people still use websites because you never know when the social media will get rid of you or go bye-bye or have an
That's true.
issue or
Yeah, shadow ban you or
want to own your own
freeze your
stuff, you
account
know?
because you shared an opinion that was contrary to the narrative. You're sharing misinformation, and then 6 months later, it's like all the information was actually the misinformation, or all the misinformation was actually the truth, right?
Here we go.
Anyway,
Here we go.
yeah,
No, that's a rabbit hole. But no, I think it's just important not to have all your eggs in one basket. I guess is how I could sum it up.
sweet. All right, man.
So, man, we
Till
got
next
something
week.
cool to say, or like because I can end it with my favorite saying if you want me to. This is how
You
I
do,
end
yeah.
all my.
You do it this week, and I'll think of up a cool saying for next
Okay.
week.
Until next week, keep being you. Keep being great,
And don't litter.
and don't litter. All right. This is Jeff Townsend. Thanks for checking out the Austin Aries Show here on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to it and share it with all your friends. There are plenty of more videos for you to check out in the meantime. And this content, of course, is available on all podcast listening platforms. If you want to learn more about the show, go to austinariesshow.com.